Okay, looking at what you see up on the board with everything that we've learned so far, what is everything that you could tell me about these? We know that they're neurons, okay? And what is going to be that driving force that allows, let's say, a nerve impulse to go from one cell to another? What's going to drive that? Say that again? The axon's the structure, but that doesn't explain what drives it inside of the axon. We looked at a video and we put a diagram up on the board just like this. It's the driving factor behind that. And we had said something with these two numbers. Okay, so which one's associated with the number 3? Which one's associated with the number 2? Say that again. Okay, so this one is our potassium, then this one is our sodium. Okay, and so what that means then, even though what direction are both of these impulses going to go? Left to right or right to left? Okay, so which one is more efficient? Really? How or why could it be the bottom? Yeah, so the thicker the axon, okay, would mean that there's something that's coated on the outside here, okay? So this is coated with myelin then. And then what we see happening here is when we have sodium, okay, it's going to be pumped against its concentration gradient, okay? Potassium will diffuse across, well, so does sodium, but they have to be pumped back against their concentration gradient. And then it starts here and then is moving in this direction, okay? And it's a very basic term that we've talked about with athletic venues where it starts, it keeps going, and does, what's that term called? Yeah, it's the wave, but we can do better than that. Oh, I was just curious what we're doing. Okay? But there's a better term for that. And it's not on the board. It's what we would have left off with last Friday. Action something. And maybe you said that I just did not hear. Action potentials. That's right. So not only do these action potentials go from one neuron to another, they can also stimulate muscles then as well. And that's something that we will talk about today. So here we're talking about this impulse conduction, just like what we had, that you correctly said, the greater the diameter, the faster the impulse. So I think this is what we just talked about, action potentials. It's a sequence of the sodium and potassium ions going in and out of that axon that pushes or drives that impulse down its axon from one side to the next. Kind of like we said, the wave in athletic venues. Okay? So then the bigger the diameter, the more efficient that's going to be. Okay, so new material then. We did this one too? Oh, okay. Okay, so we'll put something that is referring to this up on the board here in just a moment. Okay, let me see what's next before we put our diagram up on the board. Couple changes that we have. I'll be assigning a paper tomorrow, and then maybe you already noticed on Thursday we'll have a vocabulary evaluation for this chapter. Okay, does everyone have this content that wants it? Take that as a yes. I don't hear anything other than that. Okay. So when we put this to, we're talking about this. So if we have a muscle cell that needs to be, how do our muscle cells actually know when to be stimulated? Well, it's going to be your nervous system that does that. So if this is really any type of muscle tissue here, okay, could be a fibers, whichever, and okay, so here's your neuron. It's going to send this impulse down here, and then I need to leave a bigger gap than that. Okay. Because that's essentially what it would look like, because what did it, okay? This synaptic cleft then, okay? The distal ends of neurons have one or more extension called synaptic knobs, okay? So that's what we're referring to here, okay? So then what we see happening is as this impulse is going down through this axon towards this direction, okay, it does not come in contact with your muscle cells. Rather, it is a type of signal that jumps across this gap. That's why we call it a synapse. And what happens is once it gets towards the end, we see, I'm just going to put triangles here. It's a chemical signal that leaves this structure here, which looks like what you have on, how do you open a door? The handle or what? The doorknob, okay? So then this looks like a doorknob, okay? That's what we call it, the synaptical cleft or synaptical knob, I think is what it said, okay? That's what we're calling right here, synaptical knobs. These knobs are absent in dendrites as the terminal end of the axon contains these synaptic vesicles. So once we get towards the end, okay, this chemical signal jumps this gap. And part of your vocabulary, this gap is called a neurotransmitter. Oops, better start over. Does anyone know, and there's no reason that you would, but what is that neurotransmitter called? It has a specific name. It's probably one of your vocab terms. So rather than me just telling you, perhaps look at your vocabulary list and see once what you can come up with. I bet it starts with the letter A. I could be mistaken, but I think it's on your list. If not, look for, do you see neurotransmitter on your list? Maybe I'm way out in left field here. Okay? So with that, just a moment here. So we see the term neurotransmitter. And what does your vocabulary term neurotransmitter say? Does it say synapse or synaptical cleft? Okay? So then this process here, okay, we could refer to as the synaptical cleft. Okay? Okay? And this chemical signal, these triangles, okay, it's called this. I'm just curious. I have to get my reading glasses. I would have thought that that was one of your vocabulary terms here. Okay, and I do not see that. Okay. All right. Glad we went over that now. This, when we put all of this together, okay, this neurotransmitter, it's called acetylcholine. That's what these triangles are, because as this impulse goes, notice that that's not making direct contact with this, with your muscle fibers, because they have to be stimulated in order to actually contract. What's probably the, what do I want to say, the most important muscle that contracts because of electricity? It wouldn't be skeletal muscles, something that you can, people mistake what is actually happening when you send a shock through the body. What important muscle may have to be shocked? Yeah, the heart does that, okay? Because it has its own, you could say almost its own power supply, because what's happening is it's the electricity that is causing that to go out of rhythm. So when you take a defibrillator, okay, you're not restarting the heart, okay? You're actually stopping it, okay? You might say, well, why would you want to do something like that? Well, sometimes what happens when a heart starts to fibrillate, okay, it's not doing its normal contracting like this. It might be doing a type of movement like this. So once you apply those two types of paddles on there and shoot a heck of a lot of electricity through there, it stops the heart, okay? You might think, well, why would you want to do that? Well, if it's out of rhythm, the only way you can get that back to its own sinusoidal rhythm, I think is how you pronounce that, you have to stop it, and then how the brain works will actually allow it to get back on its normal pace, back to that normal rhythmic contraction, okay? So these have to be stimulated by an electrical supply, and the heart's no different. Same thing with our skeletal muscles. It's the sodium-potassium pump that goes down some go down a concentration gradient, some have to be pumped against their concentration gradient, and that's what allows not only just muscle cell movement, okay, or nerve cell to nerve cell conduction, but also takes place here as well. You'd have that sodium coming in at 3 and then pumped back out at 2, okay? Or no, pumped out at 3, and the potassium's 2. That's right, we had established that here. Yes? This here? The acetylcholine is the actual name of the neurotransmitter. There's,
So those are the triangles?
yes, these triangles are acetylcholine. That's right. So the acetylcholine, again, is what actually causes that to contract. Because what's happening is these neurotransmitters are looking for binding sites on the muscle fiber. And then they will continue to contract until those binding sites have been removed. And there's a little bit of energy that's needed to cause that muscle fiber to relax, okay? One of the, if you're a fan of watching crime scene shows, okay, one of the things that may happen is the body starts to stiffen up. That's what we call, I think it's called rigor mortis, or just refer to it as the body's in rigor, which means those muscles, these remain in a contracted state until these binding sites have been busted, but it takes energy to do that. So if a in these crime scene shows, when they're looking at a body, why is it stiff? Why are the muscles still contracting? Because we said, what does it take for those binding sites to release? It takes energy to do that. So why is that body in rigor then? Maybe. Whether it's to show bones or NCIS or whichever. That body is in rigor. It's stiff. It takes energy to release that. So why is it stiff? Why doesn't it have any energy? Because what? Because on the show, they're what? They're dead. That's right. You can't produce any energy in that fashion. That's why those muscle cells remain, or muscles remain in a contracted state. All right. I don't think we're going to go any further than that. Where does that put us? Layers of the spinal cord. There's just one last thing I wanted to do. Okay. And that is, refer to this diagram. Then that'll be it for today. Hopefully we still have it. Okay. Oh, I don't think we can quite make it that big. Oh, yeah, we can. Yes, sir. This side, the somatic nervous system, does that, I don't think I can have it that big. I'm going to have to shrink it. I think that would possibly, there we go. Okay. So again, here's our central computer here. That's what I refer to, of course, as the central nervous system. So special receptors, okay? Not just somatic. Somatic might mean something from your muscle tissue itself. But special receptors would be within your senses. And taste, maybe, would have special receptors. What else may do that? Okay? And this goes back to when you're walking down the hallway and all of a sudden you turn and look this way. Someone said it. Sight. Okay? So that might do it as well. These special receptors are found in your mouth, your eyes, where else maybe? Your ears, that's right, and within your oral cavity. Okay? Because, let's say on your tongue, and perhaps when you were young, if one of your parents was going to give you a dose of maybe Motrin or aspirin or something to that effect, your pharynx just isn't big enough to swallow that pill. So what may they have done to help you swallow that medication? Could be. I don't know. We used to crush them between two spoons. Take a pill, crush it, and then what? You could do that too. But my point is, then you take that little bit of crushed medication, and if you don't swallow it all, what's true about aspirin? What does it taste like, do you think, if you don't get it swallowed right away? It does not taste good. So when you put in applesauce, you kind of hide that bitterness. But just think, these special receptors that are found inside your oral cavity, you don't get that aspirin swallowed and it tastes really bitter, your response is probably going to look like what? Probably going to go like that, right? Okay, so that's done by skeletal muscles. So the response through the afferent division is going up into this system. The outgoing response is you almost want to gag. That is done with your skeletal muscles. You make different facial expressions saying this is horrible. That could be one aspect. So that's just a general reaction. Okay. That wasn't supposed to happen. But why is that different than the other side? We've only talked about it. We never really went into any specific reasoning for that. But what's true about this side? Do we have conscious control over our skeletal muscles? Yes, we do. Okay? But unless it's a response to where we're talking about that bitterness. Okay? We do have conscious control over this. But what about these types of muscles? Do we have conscious control over them? No. That's why we call this the autonomic side and this the somatic side. Okay? So then one way to possibly keep these separate, okay? Sometimes in using English grammar, don't you talk about cause and effect? Does that sound familiar? So to keep these separate, the cause, okay, that bitter pill going to the afferent division, and the effect is just your facial expression or how you react to that. Or again, walking down the hallway, see something out of the corner of your eye, and you turn and you look, okay? So that's what happens on your somatic side. The effect, you see something, the effect, you turn and look, okay? So perhaps that can help you differentiate between which division that we're talking about, the afferent or the efferent, okay? Same thing here, a visceral receptor, okay? Let's say within the lining of your stomach, if you start to feel nauseous, you don't have conscious control over that. So those visceral receptors go through your afferent division, and then the efferent division, okay, smooth muscle within your stomach and your intestines may cause you to essentially vomit. Okay, again, you don't have conscious control over that. All right. So that's where we're going to stop for today. We will have papers to hand out tomorrow and vocabulary evaluation on Thursday. Now, again, I don't know what time you'll get in here because of your your ASVAB testing, but seniors will get some quality time tomorrow. Right? Okay. We will catch up to you next time.